Greetings, I haven't been with you for a few weeks. It's wonderful to be here. I speak to my wife and myself. Our scripture today is from Psalm 23, which should be very, very familiar. I remember as a child, every child learned Psalm 23 and 100. So I'm going to read today from the Old King James version of that, and it fits in as part of the message. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Today and always, you always wonder what I have. I want to read from this today. And I want to tell you a story behind the poem I'm about to read. Many years ago, with the Department of Family and Children's Services in DeKalb County, I was in charge of volunteers, publications, indigent burials, the Christmas program for 1,200 kids and so forth. But I was told, why don't you go out to the children's shelter out there at Stone Mountain and see what you can do for those kids. So for about 550 sessions, they thought it would last about 6 or 8 sessions, 550 sessions, I had people coming in, they were executives, junior executives, teachers, everything, to try to work with those kids. Frankly, to use an expression, it was hell out there. These were little children who were 8, 10, 12, 14 years old. Some of them acted out a little bit, a lot sometimes. They throw things. But others were kids just like my grandchildren. They went to bed at night, but they didn't have a mother or daddy to sit down with them or read stories to them or tuck them in or comfort them. And it hurt. It hurt seeing these kids like that. Finally, after I retired, the shelter closed down. It was out of hand. But I was determined to do some things and give these kids some experiences. I taught some of them to swim. We did all kinds of things with them. 4 times with some spelunkers. You know what a spelunker is?
Yep.
It's a person who likes to go into caves. Somebody goes into, it's not like a cave with Coke machines and admission tickets. These are caves that are unknown to the general public. Anyway, I went down, requisitioned a truck, a van from the state 4 different times, took these kids up into Tennessee sometimes into northeast Georgia. Well, one time, leading up to this, one time I took them up to a cave in northeast Georgia. I couldn't take you back there for any reason. And as we approached the cave, there's a little hole in the ground. And we went into that cave, dropped down into the cave. They went on back, way on back into the cave, and I decided I was going to wait up front. Everybody who was a part of the party, about 8 or 9 kids, about 4 or 5 speedrunners, wore helmets like the miners wear, with lights on them, or else they carried flashlights. Well, here's the story of what happened to me in that cave. I dropped like a rabbit into the earth, into darkness, into coolness, into this gigantic echo chamber and the solitude of the hidden caverns of a North Georgia hill. Here the earth, hidden from all eyes, has shifted for eons. Only the unseen bat has known this refuge until man just yesterday became privy and plunged deep into this hideaway. I am the intruder, and yet I am invaded by these hidden relics, jagged stones, their ledges and tunnels. They dare me to overcome the obstacle course to nowhere. This cave penetrates me. The lights out, and my interior must come to grips with feelings that haunt. No radio frequencies to interrupt. Just me sitting within the soul of the earth. Now, I wrote that poem and I named it Confrontation, because basically you're confronting yourself at times. When you seek solitude, you have a time of prayer, a time of meditation, a time of finding yourself, a time of putting things together after you come out of the highways and byways of life. So that was the experience that I had. Now I want us to think, all right, that was the interior of the earth. We think of mountaintop experiences. I want us today to think of experiences at the marsh, think of experiences over the woods. You know, sometimes the experiences you can have in your home might be to go back to the bathroom and close the door, or go out on the porch and close the door. We all don't have forests and marshes and oceans and caves to go into. But there's a poem that I found many, many years ago that stayed with me, and some of you may know it. It's turned into a song. If you pull it up on the computer, you'll see about 25 or 30 different groups trying to sing it. Have any of you ever heard of the song, I Know A Green Cathedral? I Know A Green Cathedral. All right, I'm going to read that to you, and someday you may want to sing it. But it's the idea of going up. I have some forest behind my house. We kept some developers from coming in a few years ago, and I have a forest up there, and I keep a trail in there. A few weeks ago, I got down on my hands and knees in my patched jeans and got muddy trying to clip out the English ivy. So that is my kind of background where I go up and hide sometimes. I know a green cathedral, a hallowed forest shrine, where trees in love join hands above to arch your prayer and mine. Within its cool depths sacred, the priestly cedar sighs, and the fir and pine lift arms divine unto the clear blue skies. In my dear green cathedral, there is a quiet seat, a choir loft in branched croft, where songs of birds come sweet. And I like to think at evening, when the stars its arches light, that my Lord and God treads its hallowed sod in the cool, calm peace of night. I have copies of that, some of you want it later. There's a favorite poet that all of you know some way. All of you have heard of Sidney Lanier, haven't you? In fact, the lake up there that feeds your lawns and your bathrooms and your cooking and everything is called Lake Sidney Lanier. And years ago, back in the 1800s, Sidney Lanier, he died about 1881, Sidney Lanier wrote a poem about that river that comes down, the river, the Chattahoochee. It's now dammed up, that's how we get our water, and then it goes down to feed West Point Lake, and it borders Georgia and Alabama, and goes down to feed the oyster beds. All right, I want to read one stanza out of the Song of the Chattahoochee, because it is inspiring. And Sidney Lanier, by the way, I have, see where I have my book. I thought I had it. Here it is. Sidney Lanier's poems are in this book. Now, you may get tired of me telling those off stories, but I'm going to tell you a story about this book. I'm going to quote Sidney Lanier some today. Oh, Randall, can't you afford something better than that? Well, I could tell you I got it for a quarter at the yard sale, but I won't tell you that. What I'm going to tell you is that my grandmother was Estelle Lula Lanier. My father was Campbell Lanier Randall. And I have a book at home about that thick, about the history of the Laniers that goes back to France. This is 1897, Ms. Estelle Lanier Randall from her old man. So this book is, I've been patching it up, hoping I can keep it together. But this is the song of the, I'll read the song of the Chattahoochee off this page rather from in here. It's in here. Let's see, well, I'll do it in here. The song of the Chattahoochee. I'm just going to read you the first stanza. And if you know some of it, you can quote it with me. Out of the hills of Habersham, down in the valleys of Hall, I hurry amain to reach the plain, run the rapid and leap the fall, split the rock and together again, accept my bed on narrow wide, and flee from folly on every side, with a lover's pain to attain the plain, far from the valleys of Habersham, far from the valleys of Hall. And that doesn't have the word God and prayer in there, but Sidney Lanier was deeply prayerful about a lot of things. In fact, Sidney Lanier, when he was 25 years old in writing, he came up with this. Music means harmony, harmony means love, and love means God. And when he wrote all his poetry, that most of us agree with, it was always a spiritual thing with him. And what I'm trying to help us find today is some stepping stones to help us to realize or to enjoy sacredness of life, to enjoy that which is reverent and that which is sacred. You don't hear much about sacredness of life now. This is a sanctuary we come in to celebrate sacredness. There was a picture of some men on the front of a newspaper about 2 weeks ago, and in front of 1,500 people, in front of national cameras. And you know what the men were doing? They were looking at their little gadgets. There's an obsession now in society with hold it up in your ear, or while you're driving, or even a man and woman quite often in a restaurant. One of them is sitting there. Many people can't even go home. You see a hair of a little boy sitting at the dinner table at night, and they're going like this. They're not talking to anybody. There's a dearth of quietness. There's a dearth of sacredness. I'm not so much concerned with people using cell phones. I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Wonderful, the gadgets we have, the phones we have, the communications we have. What worries me is the backwardness of people when people have to all the time, almost day and night, they're so empty, they're empty of content, of thought, of values, that they have to simply all the time be jabbering, or something has to be blaring. The commercial interests of this country are attacking us with mail, TV, telephone calls, anything you want to do. It's up to you and up to me to say, hey, wait a minute. I reserve some time for myself. I make my own decisions out of my own resources. Oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. You listen to TV. You do this. You do. We're going to control you. And by gosh, they're pretty successful in many ways. Controlling us, barraging us. It's up to us to be the ones to say, no, hey, I am a person. I have my dignity. I live. I have my sacred moments. I have content that I dwell upon, thoughts that I dwell upon. You're not going to dictate my life in every way you can, to take my time, my life, my resources, of everything that I have. I am putting a stop to it. I am in control of my life. You don't control it. Whether you're a Procter & Gamble, or whether you're a motor company, or whatever you are, I control my life. Oh, no, you don't. We pay for these commercials, and you spend all your time with TV going, with game shows, and with cute women up front, and everything going on. You don't control your life. We control it. Okay. Make up your mind. Make up your decisions. Because you can't do both. You can't have something blaring at you all the time by your design, because you cut it on and you don't cut it off, and have a sacred life in addition to that. You can't have both. You only have 24 hours a day. We only have so much living to do. So what I'm thinking of today is steps that you might take, things you might do. I almost brought an exhibit today of Chagall. I'll bring it next time. They're having an exhibit started in New York today of Chagall. It's a big full-page ad, and I have 3 or 4 of his volumes at home. Chagall was a great painter, and he did sacred scenes. He did sacred scenes all the time. So what I'm suggesting is one thing to fill that gap, to fill in so you can think of something sacred, is to go to some of the great paintings of the world. And don't try to decipher what they'll say, or who did what, or how long he lived, or how much he got for a painting. Some of these paintings now, that where the artist starved, recently have gotten up to $23 million. Don't look at something for the value. Say, hey, let this speak to me. Let God speak to me through a certain painting. Let God speak to me through some poetry that I have. You can go to the library, you can check out all you want to in the way of great art books. You can check out poetry. You can write your own poetry. You can do your own thinking, but you don't have to be dictated by commercial interest. Now, I envision the Wheaties people have to sell their Wheaties. Ford people have to sell their Fords. Other people have to sell their merchandise. But frankly, you have to put up some barriers for yourself and say, I want my sacred moments. I deserve my sacred moments. I am a person of some dignity. I reserve the right to have private moments. Let me read you from Sidney Lanier, another place where he thought of sacredness. Some of you have been over toward Jekyll Island, and you've seen the great big bridges down there named Lanier Bridges. But he was, long before that stuff was built, Sidney Lanier wrote about the Marshes of Glynn, one of his most famous poems he ever wrote. That and the Song of the Chattahoochee, and another one named Coin. As the marsh hen secretly builds on the watery side, behold, I will build me a nest on the greatness of God. I will fly in the greatness of God, as the marsh hen flies, in the freedom that fills all the space twixt the marsh and the skies. By so many roots as the marsh grass sends in the sod, I will hardly lay me a hold on the greatness of God. Oh, like to the greatness of God is the greatness within, the rains of the marshes, the liberal marshes of Glynn. Sidney had a certain sense of reverence now, the marshes, speaking of God. I like to think we follow that path somewhere. What I've demonstrated today was down on the ocean front, and in a cave, and up in the woods, and on the river. But you can't always find nature to go out and have your prayers, to have your sacred moments. Where can we have our sacred moments? You have it here at church sometimes, or sometimes there's not enough reverence in the church building. I've seen people wear their houses, I've seen them shout and everything else. We could have more reverence in our church building. As a busy housewife, or a busy grandmother, or a husband, or an aunt, or an uncle, you need to take moments and say, hey, I'm reserving a certain space, a certain time every day. That's my challenge to you, to reserve a certain time, a certain place, a certain space, but also have something to fill that time and that space with. I'm suggesting that you think on your portrait, that you go to the library and you check out great paintings, that you read from your scriptures, like we read from Psalms 23 there. This is anything that you can sit down with and meditate. You need a reprieve. I need a reprieve. I need a reprieve from the four-lane highways. I need a reprieve from the commercials. I need a reprieve from the war in Syria. I need a reprieve from 1,400 people being gassed to death. I need a reprieve from some of this. It comes at us. And every morning we read about in our papers about what's going on in the world. And we wonder how long things are going to stay together or what's going to happen. It seems in the morning paper we've avoided a war because the Russians and the U.S. people have finally sat down and maybe we averted a war. But can we meditate? Can we meditate on things other? We have a right to. It may seem selfish. Can we meditate on those things that are meaningful to us? I know enough of all of us, and you know enough of Helen and me, to where we all have the events going on in our life. We have wonderful things happening. Kids going off to school. We have marriages happening. We have friends. We have grandchildren. Sometimes we have ailments and deep, deep sicknesses that we're dealing with. We have a lot going on in our lives. We need a time to meditate and to pull things together. So that's the message I have for you today. Let's meditate. Let's take a time. Let's designate a time to do that. A time each day to do that. I found myself this morning, I get up at 4 o'clock to go out and pick up my 2 newspapers. And I found myself this morning sitting on the bench there, thinking. And quite often, that early time in the morning is when time to think. For somebody else, it can be late at night, after the children have gone to bed. It can be after everything is stopped and you have a time. There's a lot of pressure on us now. Most of us. Our physical ailments, financial, sickness, relatives. We need a time of respite to pull ourselves together and be fortified. It can be a prayer to God to help me. And we have here our prayers in our circle. These prayers can be more often, it can be in private. So I'll give that the message to you today. And I'm going to give you copies of all these poetry we have read. I'm going to finish with this. There's a poem here that's also in your songbook. It may be in your songbook right here. It's in the old Christian church hymnal, but it's something that Jesus did. Jesus did in the most crucial time of his whole life. And Sidney Lanier wrote about it. Into the woods my master went, clean forspent. Into the woods my master came, forspent with love and shame. But the olives, they were not blind to him, and the little gray leaves were kind to him. The thorn tree had a mind to him when into the woods he came. Out of the woods my master went, and he was well content. Out of the woods my master came, content with death and shame. When death and shame would woo him last, 'twas on a tree they slew him last. When out of the woods he came. Amen. Jesus went into the woods at that crucial time when he knew it was about over. And the sacrifice was coming, the deceptions were coming, the crucifixion was at hand. He took his time and he set that precedent for us. Thank you.